Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
Now, here's your host, Ed Cohen.
Hi, it's Ed Cohen in San Diego, and this is part 2 of Protocol's Global Mobility Assignment with our fearless leader, Jeff Houck from Canada. Hello, Jeff.
Good morning.
And hello, Mirela, Marin from Toronto area, and Zinga.
Good morning, everyone.
And hi to Michael Deane in Toronto. Also, it's Toronto, correct?
It is also Toronto.
I really welcome you guys. So this topic that Jeff came up with and is catching fire. There's a lot of people around the world very interested in this about the protocols. Protocols, we've come to find out, are methods and ways of doing things better, best practices. Jeff, why don't you do a little bit better intro than me about the protocol meaning relating to global mobility assignment management coming up for the new now.
The new now. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
I wanted to comment. Our last show was great. I thought that we had some of the traction that we needed, kept it on point, and I'm looking forward to today, where we can talk about the protocols and piece. This, as you mentioned, Ed, is the second session out of 4. This one today that we're going to talk about is on assignment readiness, with our focus on not the tactical out service pieces, but really those that mobility practitioners have to consider, and how we partner with those of us in other service pieces, like our DSPs, destination service providers, and our relocation management companies, as well as other external, and how we bring those in, and we move forward with making sure that the candidate that has been selected for the assignment has everything in place so that their assignment can be successful for themselves and family.
One last thing before we launch, if you could just do a quick review from last week about the vetting or the assessment of the family.
Sure. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today as far as that psychosocial piece. But those who watched last week may recall that we had Kirsten Palmer on, who is an HR business partner, who I've had the pleasure with working over the years. And she really dug in on defining what we need to do for the role. So you're selecting the candidate based on the role. And then once the candidate who the business looks at to be successful and able to do that, who is nimble in their ideas, not just in their talent. But then what we're going to do is we're going to take them to where we're talking about today. And that's really looking at the assessment to see if they're good for the assignment, if they're really actually going to be durable and grow in a different location. And part of that process engages with the family at the same time to make sure that everybody's set up for success and that there are not any red flags that we'd have to consider.
So we're talking about normalcy here of actually sending physical movement of people. But how does that relate to, if I could interject this, to virtual assignments or hybrid assignments?
Our piece here is on the physical is where our mandate was, just because this is still going on, and I think it's important for people to understand that although the virtual aspect of communication and assignment and leading and doing business virtually has certainly seen a huge surge over the last year. There are still very many real cases where the physical presence is required for employees and families in locations to get the job done. And I think it's important that while many businesses, and Ed, you referenced this, are shut down completely, there are a whole bunch of global companies that are continuing to do business in a global environment, which I think is it probably exemplifies why we have to make sure that everything, and what we're talking about, some of it today, is so important, that the duty of care is taken care of, and all of these things we're talking about. So, although the virtual is happening, And they can be just as challenging because you're still dealing, if not more so, maybe you're in a North American time zone and your assignment's in Asia. Doing that virtually is basically like working the night shift. So in a case like that, I would suggest that if you can, manage duty of care, you'd be better off to actually be in a location so that you're not fighting a dual time zone type of model.
And Jeff, to your point, it strikes me that it's also really important from a cultural integration perspective to understand that etiquette, business practices, conduct in meetings may look a little bit different the other side of the world. So whether you're there physically or virtually, some of those challenges remain the same, as well as we're going to talk a little bit about language and language lessons. The same would apply. I mean, I've experienced situations where I'm on a call and people have a conversation in their native language and completely excludes the rest of it. They're not doing it to be rude, but these things come up, and I think we have to be sensitive that whether it's a physical assignment or a virtual assignment, some of the things that we need to consider and providing the tools and means to educate and prepare the candidates are in place for success.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So Jeff, where do you want to start? With assessment or readiness?
Yeah, I think we'd like to start off leaving off where we were. So we were talking about the candidate selection when we left off last week. And I think, Mirela, I'm going to get you to lead off on the assessment piece. I think that, when we were talking, this is something that we all should do. We all know we should do. Some of us do, and Mirela, give us our experience. But if you could go on the basis of this, I'd just appreciate it because we had a great conversation.
I'm happy to do it. So, it's been a common practice in the industry that really before the final decision and the green light is given on a candidate, that there is a third-party independent assessment being done to help the business and the candidate or recognize whether or not there are any risks to a particular assignment being successful. And by this kind of an assessment being done by a third party, it's really objective in the way it's being handled. It's driven consistently, and the intention is to cue a number of specific questions to flesh out the personal circumstances, the excitement, the fears, the trepidations, and potentially items that could be of concern and impede on the ability for this assignment to be successful. Often enough, these assessments would also include the family because they play a significant role in the success of a foreign assignment and the completion of that assignment. What I would caution is that, again, the assessment shouldn't be conducted as an afterthought or, we've ticked a box on a number of things that we have to do. It really has to be meaningful and be completed before that final decision, as I said, is being made. In my experience, I've had situations where the assessment was done and was used with that intended purpose to really identify which of the perhaps two last candidates being considered for the role is likely to be more successful, and the results of that assessment being discussed very thoroughly with the manager and the candidate to make that final decision to make sure it's the right decision for both parties. But in other cases, it's been where the assessment was completed, the report that was produced by the third party was shared with the manager and the employee, and really it didn't make a difference whether or not the assignment was a go because it was already pre-decided that it was. And in those cases where those red flags were not reviewed, understood, and there were no actions taken to mitigate the risks of those red flags potentially causing a failed assignment, the assignment did fail. Whether it was because the family was not happy, because the spouse was giving up a career, and that came with some buildup and resentment over time. The children just did not climatize well to a new location, and sometimes that's a little harder if they're in the teenage years and they feel that they have a voice in making these decisions, and sometimes their decisions and thoughts are overlooked. So it is absolutely pertinent that if you are actually, incurring the expense and doing the due diligence and completing these assessments, that they're not an afterthought, they're not a tick box on a form of steps in the process, that they're thoroughly examined. And I also think it's very responsible for organizations to kind of do a check back that, as we're halfway through the assignment to, perhaps not formally through a needs assessment or another evaluation, but really do a little bit of a look back and say, look, have we been successful in addressing some of the things that were causing somewhat of a threat to the success of the assignment? How well are we tracking? Have we overcome those challenges? And have new things developed in the family circumstances that we need to think about as we plan on potentially extending an assignment abroad, and now the personal circumstances of the spouse or the children may have shifted and changed over time. So I think it's a huge investment, but a very worthwhile one.
Great explanation, thank you. And I think that really ties in to what Kirsten had said, is that what we have learned for best assignment practices is someone who is extremely strong technically or in a leadership role does not always make the best candidate for an assignment. It is really the underlying pieces to make sure that they're nimble enough to do that. And with that, I think it's a perfect segue to lead off to Michael Deane from All Points Relocation. Is going to give us an overview of part of this where we finish the assessment and now we move forward to really that cultural readiness and awareness piece. Michael, can you give us some insight?
So I'm a big fan of cross-cultural training. I think it's very, very important. It's an important investment in your employee. It's an important investment in the assignment. Managing relationships between colleagues, subordinates, superiors can be tough at the best of times, and we share a culture. So, when an individual first enters a new culture, they can find it difficult working with new colleagues. Social norms may differ hugely, increasing the risk of accidental disrespect, misunderstanding, erosion of trust, team building. All of these things become harder. So I view cross-cultural training as an insurance package for a successful assignment and a machine that produces true global leaders. So it is about readiness. Once upon a time, this was delivered after arrival. That's no longer necessarily best practice, because as Jeff said really well, this is a readiness service. Just like destinations are a productivity enhancement, so is cross-cultural training, as assignees can get into office life quickly and families can settle quickly. So that's what cross-cultural gives us. So what is it? It starts with the needs assessment to create your own personal cultural profile according to a few different dimensions. These are dimensions such as your attitudes and opinions with regards to relationships, time, hierarchy, communication, formality, but even to more obscure concepts such as, do you think in a group-oriented way, or do you think in a more individualistic way, or where do you land on that spectrum? And then you've got your own personal cultural profile, and then you have the destination cultural profile, and you've got a gap between them. And you want to be able to have a cultural trainer to put an action plan into place as to how to close that gap. These services have evolved over the years. They're excellent online services now with excellent online coaches, so on and so forth. And it was funny, Jeff, in preparing for this, I was looking around and I saw that there was a study of 11,500 business leaders by the Corporate Leadership Council, and they discovered that those leaders without cross-cultural skill sets were underperforming compared to those who had cross-cultural skill sets, and that includes back at home country after the assignment. So it's a bit unfortunate, I find, that that cross-cultural can be a line item on a relocation cost sheet that can be struck because you really are investing in the employee.
Yeah, Mirela, what is your current and recent experience with destination services as an insurance policy?
I think cross-cultural training, as Michael said, is critical, not only prior to departure, but it is an ongoing need. And I feel that there has been a shift in moving that kind of training to be online. In the past and more historically, folks would sit with a cross-cultural trainer for 4 hours and have a huge dump of data and information that they were expected to retain and take with them on the assignment to help them be more successful in climatizing and integrating into that new space, into that new company, and to a new culture. I found that executives and employees going on these assignments were really challenged to fit that in, particularly as they were wrapping up their duties and responsibilities in the home country, and often enough probably double hatting before they even left in terms of their business deliverables and requirements in the host. So there's been a shift in providing that cultural training more virtually and online, but also making that available not just prior to departure, but really within that first year of being abroad, and activating those resources to them, doing a lot of self-assessments and evaluations to really understand where they fit from that cultural perspective. I think it is an absolute key and essential offering of any global mobility program. This investment is being made, and I think from a cost perspective, it is such a low cost item that yields such a huge benefit.
Agreed.
That it is, it's a really highly recommended component of your policy.
Really good points, Mirela. Excellent.
I think one of the pieces where we're going on, and then I think this marries really nice with the next one. We're talking about online and how we've had the shift on that. But with the use of technology and these online tools, one of the things that we have seen, which are extremely helpful for those that want to engage as a self-service tool, the teaching is there, but there's also opportunity for testing. So these people are able to, that are going out on assignments, they're taking some of these fundamentals and the cultural awareness and readiness, and they're actually able to do tests themselves on it to see how they're scoring, how their mind thought is, and how they're approaching these things. So these are not just a one-sided tool, they're actually interactive so that people can actually shift to get into the real mindset of where they are. So, again, it's something that where the value of these cannot be overstated for such a small investment.
And because the access is granted to the individual, there is no one stopping them from actually having the family huddle around them and do a family assessment or do an individual assessment for the accompanied spouse and the children, and giving them, first of all, the opportunity to participate in the experience, because I think that's often overlooked, and the kids are kind of said, well, they're just kids, they're going to go along, they're going to adjust, they're resilient, and they'll bounce right into it. But the truth is that they require that same level of access to those tools and resources. And I think moving and shifting away from that, sitting across the table from a cultural trainer for 4 hours and trying to absorb as much as you can in that time frame, to an online platform that makes all of these resources that, as you said, Jeff, are interactive and available to the extended family, is going to generate an increase in success of these assignments.
Especially the use of video rather than talking heads.
Yeah, Michael, you said something that actually struck me as really interesting, and you talked about that survey of the executives, and I feel that a lot of organizations, as they're preparing their future leaders, they're looking at global mobility as a means to give them that international experience, to prepare them for running an organization worldwide. And hand in hand with that goes that cultural training and a simulation to understand that perhaps the methodologies of running the business in Latin America may be a little different than running the business in Asia, or running the business in North America, or in the Middle East. So very interesting that more thought and consideration is being given in terms of even breeding and creating our next future leaders within our organization is going to look to not just necessarily a foreign assignment, but even leveraging the cultural training for them to better manage their entire global population of employees.
It's changing the mindset, and it's allowing a more nimble mindset and accepting mindset, which is a skill that can be used across business, to your point, Mirela.
Jeff, if we could reach back into last week's and bring this forward and mix it in to the idea of the role development performance.
Certainly. So this is, we're on this assessment and this readiness. Everything is layered, and that's why we're doing this series really in that chronological space. So you can see how every one of these elements, when we go through it, is just another layer of completeness and assurances. So we have identified what role needs to be done. We've selected that candidate who we think has got the skill set, technically, but as well as mentally with that capacity. The candidate assessment tests that for us so that we can actually select and be assured that they seem to be a fit. And now that they're a fit, we actually can give them the opportunity to dig in and expand their capacity and understanding of some of the what and how they're going to deal with situations and culture and different business practices through that cultural readiness and awareness piece. So by arming them with that, it allows the business, I think, to grow confidence in that employee on their success and understand the investment. So once we really get to that piece, we can now start, as we are on some of these pre-departure best practices pre-assignment, to move to some of the other things that we're going to layer on to make the employee ready for that. And the next one that we would talk about, I'm going to have Mirela lead off on this one as well, because this whole approach as to do we or don't we need it is the language service options for a foreign country and how that integrates in the employee success there. So Mirela, if you could share on some of that in your practices, I'd appreciate it.
So I think language services is absolutely critical. I would say that it's difficult to assess whether the value of that is more pertinent for the employee or it's more pertinent for the family. I think of situations where, you go into the office, let's pick Asia as a part of the world. The common language of business is English. So, the actual assignee is going to really quickly integrate, and particularly if they're in a leadership role, people will speak his or her language. But what often happens is the family that's left behind and the spouse that doesn't have a job, that is responsible for managing the settlement of the family on the ground, arranging things for their kids, running the family's life. And they're the ones that often could use the language lessons and the skills to help them better integrate locally, which I think is of tremendous value to the employee, the assignee, because if their spouse is successful in integrating and making friends, of creating a network of their own, then it's going to take a lot of pressure and a lot of stress from that individual, who will eventually discuss that at dinner time with their assignee spouse, who's going to say, look, you brought me here. I don't speak the language. I haven't made a friend. I'm lonely. You're at work 12 hours a day. We're really struggling as a family. So I think the investment is so immaterial in terms of what it costs to offer not only the employee, but their family members language lessons, that it's something that should always be included in part of policy. Obviously, people will say, I already speak that language. I'm okay. I'm not interested. I'm not going to incur the expense on behalf of the family. But I think going to the table and demonstrating to your assignee population that you as an employer care about their well-being, that care about their success, and you're willing to make what I think to be really small financial investments in something like language lessons, goes a long way in demonstrating your compassion as an employer, your focus, as I said, on their success in the assignment and their overall well-being. And I think that leads really well to another topic that we're going to talk about. But traditionally, again, language lessons were available in person. I think it has been shifting to a more an online service that people could do at their own discretion in their own time. Often enough, companies will say, look, we're going to give you $1,000 to spend towards language lessons. It's up to you how you set that up, with which vendor. You also have the option of establishing a relationship with a provider that you're comfortable with, that you've tested and tried and you're happy with, and you can facilitate those arrangements and do auto billing. So I think the options are available, but definitely, again, another area where we've seen the shift to online learning being available, where people can access it at whatever time of the day or night that they feel appropriate, and really get that benefit of picking up a few key phrases and words in those early days to help them feel a little bit more comfortable going into the office for the very first time, and also to show that they have paid attention and made some effort to actually learn a couple of phrases and some words of the local language. I think that goes a long way to demonstrate their commitment to succeed and to get along with the local folks. So I think it's a win-win for everybody, both on a personal level and from a business perspective, to ensure that language lessons is part of your policy.
So it's just, if I can just do a little dive on this for a sec. You don't have to learn how to talk in paragraphs in a new language. You just have to learn about what some faux pas is in the culture, not just language, but the culture of smile or not smile, don't do this, do that, whatever, with common things like where's the bathroom and how do you do, and je m'appelle Ed, in other words, my name is Ed, and comment allez-vous, and how are you? These little things like that, rather than sentences and grammatically correct paragraphs, will go a long way, because people will know that you're American or a Canadian in another land, and they're going to really appreciate the effort if it's sincere.
Absolutely, and I think, Ed, I mean, if you think about it, to learn another language is a huge investment of time.
Right.
And the idea is not to offer someone ongoing language lessons for the next 3 years of their assignment abroad. The idea is to get them started, as you said, with those common, simple phrases to help them. And then the hope is that they will continue of their own free will and financial investment to continue down the path of really becoming fully proficient in that language, recognizing that for some, the appetite won't be there. It's not a necessity, but for others will thrive. And I have actually an example of a former boss who him and his partner moved to Asia, to Hong Kong, and his partner was almost fluent in Cantonese, while he, as the assignee, was not. But it's because he loved it and he wanted to invest that time. So that initial $1,000 funded by the company went a long way to instill a passion and an interest in the family and then the partner to actually pick up another language. And they had a little girl who actually also was submersed into the language and picked it up and was more fluent in it than either of her dads. So there's great value to this, and I think it will just make the overall experience more successful for everyone.
Good point. Good point. And now a word from our co-sponsors. Our programs wouldn't happen without the wonderful support of our advertisers. Here they are.
Something that's really neat is that the Bridge School partners with various organizations to provide learning for their students. For example, we partner with a major ballet company, and we are able to enroll several of their students into our school. So now not only is the student able to participate in a school and have a seamless transition while they're very active in their ballet career, but now they have other dancers that are with them that are doing some of the same courses. So it's almost becoming a camaraderie where they're taking similar courses, they're working together on their ballet, and really being able to form this great partnership with these organizations to provide a needed service. A lot of times there are student athletes who will spend hours and hours at the gym or at the basketball courts, wherever it is. And if they're attending a traditional school, they're in school from 8 to 3. They get a quick snack, and then they're at the gym for 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Coming to us and having that partnership, they're able to break that up throughout the day. They can have a morning practice, get some schooling in, have an afternoon practice, finish their schooling in the evening. So there's that flexibility. And additionally, if there are tournaments or performances, it's fantastic because if there's a week where they have shows straight through, they can take that week off of learning and then pick back up when they're done. So it offers this great flexibility. And for the program owners of these sports leagues, it is a win-win situation for them because they see this need. They see this need that their students need to make sure that they are obtaining the grades necessary to be successful adults in our country and in other countries. But it provides them an environment where they can be successful at both.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by
The Bridge School, the accredited international online private school of choice at bridgek12.org.
Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
Cube Monk, featuring the world's first smart cube. Track your goods with our advanced GPS system. Welcome to the future of moving and relocation at cubemonk.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
And by heirs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at heirs.com.
Insured Nomads provides protection and peace of mind with health insurance, travel insurance, group, or tailored insurance for the globally mobile. Visit us at insurednomads.com.
And by International Auto Source. We are the vehicle experts for expats, featuring all major brands of automobiles with flexible solutions and financing. On the web at intlauto.com.
Hi, my name is Christine. I'm a nurse from the Philippines, and I got to know IAS through Worldwide Health Staff Solutions. And I want to thank IAS, especially to Matthew, for helping me get my car stress-free, headache-free. And so I just want to show you the car that I got. So it's a RAV4 XLE 2020.
As an expat moving to the USA, relocating is exciting, but it can also be stressful. Getting a car, truck, or SUV for personal transportation is usually a high priority. That's where International Auto Source comes in. We make getting the vehicle you want for your work assignment or academic program easy, so you're ready to drive when you arrive. Our product specialists have helped over 50,000 expatriates with their personal transportation needs, making us the largest international auto retailer in the world. International Auto Source gives you flexible payment options to buy, lease, or rent a vehicle from the world's leading auto brands, arrange financing on a purchase or lease without a U.S. credit history, social security number, or driving record, get full insurance coverage, and get approved easily through our low-rate factory-backed financing programs. And because we're an authorized distributor of the world's leading automotive brands, our no-haggle prices are competitive, and the buying experience is hassle-free. We'll even guarantee your new vehicle will be ready the day you arrive. With over 20 years of experience in the global community, we are the vehicle experts for expats. We are International Auto Source.
So, Michael, on destination services these days, how much is the cultural thing? You know, this young lady, Lynn Greenberg from New York, developed this app called Pivot, and it has to do with not being a stranger in a strange place,
Right.
somehow connecting online with people of your own likes and likes and ambitions.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, the destination service provider certainly can and will talk to the cultural practicalities. They can do that, and they do that every day in their job. How to get around, what to say, in what circumstance. These sort of practical gestures. A destination service provider is providing that in the time that they spend with the assignee. It does not go any distance to replacing an appropriate cross-cultural practice, however. Destination services, I don't know if you wanted to say anything to lead us in, Jeff, but destination services, now that we're talking about it, is also one of those key readiness tick boxes that is really important to kind of, Mirela's point. These are small investments. These are not that costly, and I view destination services as an immediate productivity play, as well as a duty of care issue. It's risk mitigation. It's assignment success. And when it comes to assignment readiness, the job of the destination service provider is to ensure that the family feels comfortable that they can successfully settle into the new location. That could be a pre-assignment trip where they're checking out houses to see if they meet the allowance criteria. That could be checking out before COVID. They were checking out extracurriculars so that their family could succeed in the destination, so on and so forth. But it is an absolute truism that ensuring that your employee is completely settled into the new location means that you have a happier, better adjusted employee, happier, better adjusted family. I'm reminded of the listing of unknowns. So there are known unknowns, right? So these are the things that's just knowing I'm going to have a hard time negotiating a lease in a foreign language. That's a known unknown. Everyone knows it going in. But destination services is full of nuances. There are many more unknown unknowns going into a new location, and these nuances are picked up. Is that clause in the middle of the lease, not the headline of the lease, Ed. It's the fastest way to get your local registration and not have to make 3 trips to get it done. You can read about these things on the internet, but the gaps are massive on the internet, and a destination service provider can encapsulate these things. And in a shockingly small amount of time in the pre-COVID world, we're talking about 3 to 4 days, that family is settled into their home in a secure lease, all locally registered and ready to go. It is a productivity play. There are so many tasks that are required of a new entrant to a country. Yes, of course, the home finding, but they are also getting local registration. A United States example would be getting Social Security and getting on payroll. Might be driver's licensing, these sorts of things. In other foreign countries, you have to register locally. And do you want to do that in 3 trips, or do you want to do that in 1 trip and get back to work? A destination service, depending on the country, ensures that an employee can get all these necessary tasks done in a short period of time. And then that's the productivity play. Get it done in a short period of time. But there's also risk mitigation and duty of care as well. They are in a foreign country. You need to protect them in a dispute with a landlord, for instance. They may not know the language. You want to ensure that they're getting into a lease that has their rights in mind. Many times the company might be on the lease. You want to protect the company adequately and ensures that they're treated with the proper customs, not incorrect security deposit requirements, such as that are onerous. So, and a duty of care, a classic North American example that people can get behind. But in China, it might be as simple as making sure that your landlord agrees to having an air purifier in your condo. You didn't know you needed an air purifier in your condo. 4 years later, you're going to know you needed an air purifier in that condo. In North American context, your employees could be driving a fleet car illegally if they haven't transferred their license over. A lot of that work has to be done before they even leave. And a destination service provider can make sure they do that work before they leave, because I'll tell you, trying to get a driver's license history when you're in the host country rather than the home country is a heck of a lot harder. So not doing this work can create huge headaches for the person doing it. And then it does come down to neighborhoods too. Destination services is really, it is about housing, but it's about neighborhoods. In a lot of these countries, Ed, there's no question there's expatriate communities, but not every expatriate community is right for every individual. It's not a guarantee. And then you go to other countries such as Canada and the United States, there are not expatriate communities. So how is the family, to Mirela's point, sometimes these services are geared more to the family. How is that family going to thrive in the new location and not be a strain on the assignment?
Well, thank you for that overview, because it's so telling. And there's two things I want to comment on there. I think clearly the cultural and the language are that pre-work spirit and actual employee readiness in a thought manner. The DSP and the function of that is really those tactical pieces that are taken care of through the process of really maneuvering leases, awareness, the real on the ground things that are so important to make sure that that employee does not run into unseen obstacles. To your point, the known unknown, the unknown unknown. Someone's there on the ground to really assist. Simple things. How do I call an ambulance? That's not something that you learn in language training. That's not something that you learn in cultural training. That's something that the DSP is able to assist with. How do I register for school? Am I in the right session? Am I prepaying? Is this the right school? We've got 3 to look at. Let's take our child and invest in that. But really what, Michael, your description, thank you, was deep and telling. I think there is such a misnomer that we hear in industry that someone is a relocation professional or a destination professional as a realtor. And realtors are simply not capable of delivering the breadth and the depth of the service as a real destination services provider. They might be able to get away with it, if we're doing a local to a local or it's a domestic assignment. Things are pretty tight. We don't really see the changes. But having a real bona fide and invested destination service provider on the ground to work through these nuances ahead of, but also with the employee is absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, you're right, Jeff. The training that goes on in destination services company is really, really intense, and it can be very, very different because they're learning about all kinds of different country to country combinations, so on and so forth. Not every relocation from every country is going to be the same into the area, and very often there is a fallacy that a realtor can produce these results, and they are not trained in this. And they're good at showing houses. They're good at talking about neighborhoods, but they're not necessarily good at 99% of their clientele are moving up the street. Not 99% of their clientele are moving from another country, and it's a very, very different skill set to manage. Same thing goes with schools. Same thing absolutely goes with schools. I'm glad you brought it up. School assistants, most destination service provider will have a school specialist, and that school specialist can assess, what schools are going to be right for your children, and what's right for one child may not be right for all children. So it is a different ballgame than what a realtor can provide.
Well, Michael, you remind me of an exact situation where 2 different children born to the same parents who just didn't have a fit at the same school, and that was the consultant, the educational consultant, was able to do some of that pre-assessment and make a recommendation that perhaps they should visit a number of different schools, because they recognized that one child had some unique needs and talents that could be explored more in a particular school that had more of an artistic component to its curriculum. And it is so critical to navigate with that expert at the table who's really there looking out for the best interest of you and your family. But I also think about situations where I've had the destination service provider actually take a queue in a line at a government office.
Yes.
reserving a spot so that the senior executive could be called to say, we're 10 minutes from the front of the line, get yourself here. And those are the types of real live services and support that these consultants provide to our assignees and transferees that make a world of difference. And as if you imagine you're there, you don't speak the language, you don't know your way. There's 5 different government offices that you need to visit to activate different registrations. It is extremely cumbersome, but the amount of positive experience that an individual gets and the feedback that they provide to say, like, this was incredible, like, this is exactly what I needed, you helped me out through this, is so relevant and critical in those initial first several weeks and months of settlement.
Excellent conversation. Jeff, do you want to do 5-6 minutes more?
I sure do. There's a couple more things I'd like to touch on in this, going chronologically here. On the services and support, I do not want to deeply go into another 2 tactical elements because there's specialists that take care of those. And I just want to touch on, we're moving with that destination services. Obviously, that's all about, assignee readiness and integration. 2 other legislative components that we need to speak to during this pre-departure piece on the assignment readiness is immigration and tax, which are areas of their own. They're a function of global mobility in an overarching piece. So what we want to do during this series, I wanted to talk about them and mention them, but I don't want to go into any real discussion on them. I want to say that we're assuming that immigration has been taken care of for the assignee and their family, as well as all tax consequences have been considered to protect that employee, as well as the corporation that's sending them out. Just a piece on that. The last thing that I did want to talk about here, which destination services kind of ties with, and it's really about that caring of the employee in space and making sure that they're maneuvering through in their new location, is some of the other little pieces that are big pieces potentially if something's going wrong. But that's the health and wellness, safety, and duty of care, which have a much more elevated position and placement now in the assignment services. And I know that, from my perspective, the health and wellness is really something that needs to be considered, especially now where we are with COVID. Because it's a huge consideration. And this is something that before may have just been assumed by the employee with not as much thought. Maybe they'd be thinking, oh, if I get sick, is there a hospital I can go to? But now that there's such a very real, and we've seen it, threat to health and safety, this is one of the areas where it is absolutely so impactful for the employee accepting the assignment to build in these assurances and have really that huge plan that is comprehensive so that the employee can be assured that when they're going in country, health and wellness is planned for dealing with all things around pandemic, as well as your regular day-to-day. So that's where you need to bring in your organizational specialists within the company and understand how they're partnering across with that. Other safety and duty of care, Mirela, I'd like you to speak of, because I know that safety and duty of care are directly related to the relocation area in which you're going into, where they can be, really negligible in some areas where there's not this, a huge opportunity for something to go sideways. But when we're getting into more exotic or remote or different locations, Mirela, if you could talk about some of those considerations, that would be just a perfect way to round out where we are today.
Perfect. So I think historically, when we thought about duty of care, we were more concerned about the physical well-being of our family and the employee moving abroad. And historically, global mobility was not, in my experience, that well integrated into that process, unless there was a situation where they were going into a country that was deemed to be a high risk from a security and safety perspective, from a physical aspect. And with companies that have robust operations globally who may be kind of breaking ground into third world nations that just don't have that infrastructure. And there could be a security concern potentially related to kidnapping of high profile executives, wealthy foreigners, et cetera. A lot of established companies have put in place a lot of security measures that included a formal security briefing. And actually, let me just paddle back a little bit, a full security evaluation of whether or not it would even be safe to send an assignee into that destination. And if it was deemed safe with the precautions and the resources available, then a pre-departure security briefing would be conducted with the employee and their family members to make sure that they're well protected. And in some cases, transportation, security guards, and all kinds of measures would be put in place to guarantee the ongoing safety and security of that person. I would say in the last 5 or so years, I have seen a shift in global mobility being more involved in a broader perspective. And in part is our duty to really know where our people are. And I've experienced a number of natural disasters, volcano eruptions in part of the world. And really quickly, when those situations were taking place and there were local evacuation measures that were being implemented at the country level and therefore at the company level in those jurisdictions, global mobility became instrumental in, first of all, being able to identify who do we have in that location, how do we communicate with them, how do we make sure that the expats are not left out on the peripheral and are actually included in all of the communication that the local HR and security team within the company is directing to its population to make sure that the expats and their families are also receiving all these security measures, and that the resources are available to them to go to evacuation centers to find alternate accommodations abroad. And in addition to that, because that's, again, I mean, dealing with natural disasters and unforeseen circumstances, but it's really about the well-being and of that individual. And I think a lot of expats have really suffered with overload and stress of managing their day-to-day deliverables, acclimatizing to a new country, hearing constantly the challenges and the issues that the family that is with them is experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and really reminding employees that they have their employee assistance programs available to them to also tap into, to talk out and discuss the challenges that they're experiencing as a result of that relocation. And we take it for granted that, you know, they've arrived, everything is rosy, everyone's happy, but really the next 6 to 12 months are a real true test to everybody's nerves, to everybody's sanity in the home and also in the work location. And I think it's really important that companies, as part of their broader duty of care protocol and portfolio of services, they remember that employee assistance program for the expat populations are really critical. Working a little bit with the DSPs and understanding where some of those local resources could be available to them as well is really important to make those accessible in some locations where, you know, and it may not be so common. It's also addressing the fact that in some parts of the world, it's not okay to talk about depression. It's not okay to talk about certain things that you may be experiencing, and really giving our employees the resources and the tools to deal with that and manage that stress that comes with what they're experiencing. So I think duty of care today encompasses so much more. I think we have a responsibility within our mobility programs and as mobility leaders to make sure that all of these items are not overlooked, and that are part of a full portfolio of mobility services that we offer, and that we never forget about that human element and the impact on the individual and their family as they're moving through it. And so it's not just the safety and security and security guards at the building, it's everything else that goes along to make sure. So we are fully accountable and responsible for all of these components, in my opinion.
Bravo. Excellent.
Beautifully done.
Excellent.
Love it.
So this is interesting. We're coming to the end of this session, and we're going to be there. And I'm going to have you close us out in 1 second. But I just really wanted to state for people that are watching this conversation, we've had 2 sessions here, and our employees are not even out the door. So this is really part of what my wish was to have these conversations about, so that we could really demonstrate that front end work that needs to be done so that we're ready and that our employees are ready. We're setting them up for success, and we have the tools and resources in place before they hit the ground. There's always going to be, a tweak or a little surprise, but our role is absolutely do our absolute best to mitigate these things before we're sending them into the unknown. And that goes to next week. We're going to talk about actually getting our employees and their families out the door and how we do that. So that's kind of exciting. And I've really enjoyed our conversation today, everyone. Thank you.
I did too. Now, if people want to just contact me as an intermediary, my email is publisher@globalbusiness.media, and I'll be glad to refer on. Or if you wish, people, you can recite your own contact details now.
I'm good leaving it with you, Ed. Appreciate you setting up the platform for this. It's just wonderful.
All right, thank you. I'm in San Diego. Have a nice weekend. Jeff's in Calgary, Mirela in Toronto area, Michael in Toronto area. It's really great to be together, and thank you.
Right. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Great
you.
chat.
Take care. Have a nice weekend.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.